in my, 15 plus years in this industry, I've seen prosecution attempts once. So 999 times out of 1,000, probably even more often than that. Online fraud, even if a business catches it, they don't go after it, right? They don't try to stop the person. They don't try to bring legal charges against the person. But I'll say that the stereotypical modern fraudster is intelligent but lazy. They are looking for the path of least resistance to make pretty good money, and they can make as much money in a few hours a day, or maybe 10 hours a week, as most people, make in 40 hours a week at a traditional job.
Now you're making me nervous. Like I have to be like Walter Cronkite or somebody.
That's my expectation.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty good. Here we go.
From what I heard.
Yeah. Hey, Justin, welcome. A real life money guy. That's a first for us.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, and I don't know if I can live up to the standard of being a money guy, but I'll try to answer any questions you have.
You don't happen to know a guy called Gary from the Cayman Islands, do you?
No, I knew this guy named Sam, but he got kind of caught up in some bad stuff. So
okay, he's probably friends with our Gary, so that's cool.
Yeah, probably.
We're gonna say you have nothing to do with those guys. They just used to hang out at the bar, right?
Oh yeah, no, I have nothing. Don't know them at all. Have no business relationship with them whatsoever.
I used to work in fraud for a little bit, like entry level after graduation. I had a bad golf addiction, so I like took this job. At times it was pretty interesting. You would like come up on these various scams that people run. From like your time in fraud, any like crazy ones you remember?
Yes. So fraud prevention was my first career, and I worked in that industry from about 2010. Well, really to today. Today, I'm kind of in more of a part-time capacity in that industry, but I was in that role full-time for over a decade, part-time throughout, even today. So I saw a lot of different stuff. So I worked for like a management consulting firm that focused on really the whole digital payment space. And then my specialization was payment fraud. So I saw a lot of just crazy things. Sometimes it's things where you're like, how did you let that get by you? And sometimes it's things like, wow, that's pretty clever. And sometimes I thought a lot of the things we would consider unsophisticated was still pretty damn smart. So I remember there was a auto insurance company that would write your refund if you canceled a policy. Right? You would pay for the policy 6 months, maybe 12 months in advance. And if you canceled the policy early, they would refund you. No matter how you paid, they'd refund you with a check, which probably isn't a good business practice. So people got wise to this, and they would start policies, pay with stolen payment information, cancel the policy, get a full refund before the insurance company ever knew what happened. And once they kind of figured out how to do it, they would go to a luxury car lot and get VIN numbers, right? Because you can open the door, get the vehicle identification number, then take out a policy on a car that costs six figures, right? So a pretty expensive policy. Pay for that policy with the stolen credit card, turn around and cancel that policy, get a check in the mail before they were, any the wiser.
That's great. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm rooting for them, but that's like a hole that if any of us found, I don't know how each of our individual ethics would be if we found a loop like that. With the stuff, sometimes I'm sure now with AI and all the tech has become crazy to prevent payment frauds and stuff, but sometimes they're still pretty low tech, like it's people stealing other people's mail to find out their like personal information and bit by bit building a picture and, ID fraud combined with payment fraud. There's like low tech and high tech combined now, right?
Oh yeah. So, it's funny, like I often get frustrated with all the talk around AI today because now, since Chat GPT came out about 3 years ago, it's all about, large language models. But the reality is the fraud prevention industry was using AI before I joined in 2010. Now
Mm.
it's gone from this, most sophisticated enterprise, major companies using it to now, it's been commoditized, right? It's a lot, less expensive to use. But from a fraud prevention standpoint, AI has pretty much always been there. Now what's changed is the bad guys have access to it as well. I would say though it's always kind of been a numbers game. Maybe they're not using AI, but they're using bots for repeat activity, right? And they're going to write a script or design a bot to take an action and meter that action to try to stay just under detection. So it's from a sophistication standpoint, I feel like it's always been there, but now it's cheaper and there's more access to it, right? I mean, like I could buy a malware kit, and there's no way in hell I could ever make that malware kit. It's way beyond my technical comprehension, but I could buy it and then I could use it to scrape credentials and then buy a bot or script that then, tests those credentials. So I would say one of the more interesting things I've seen towards my later time in this career field is how much fraud activity has broadened out from the payment event to account takeover, to loyalty abuse, to other things than just a payment event where all the scrutiny has traditionally been, to other parts of that like timeline of how someone might interact with the business or a website. And just everything around account takeover especially has been huge, I feel like, in the past 5 years or so.
Yeah. If you were on the other side for a day, what would you do you have like a scam you figured out in your head that you're pretty sure would work?
Well, if I did, I wouldn't tell anybody about it. But no, but honestly, if I were to do something, I would do something focused on account takeover. And here's why. A couple reasons why. So in my, 15 plus years in this industry, I've seen prosecution attempts once. 999 times out of 1,000, probably even more often than that. Online fraud, even if a business catches it, they don't go after it, right? They don't try to stop the person. They don't try to bring legal charges against the person. The one exception I saw that was when it was a money movement company, right? So a company that, kind of sends money across borders. And they felt like they had to go after it because of anti-money laundering concerns. Right, there's laws against facilitating the laundering of money in case it's a terrorist organization or a drug cartel, right? So they saw it as a liability, like we have to take a anti-money laundering approach to this. But that's the exception, not the norm. So one, you're go at it, even if you fail, you're not truly caught. You're not caught in a legal repercussion standpoint. And then you're just exploiting really poor security practices by consumers, broadly speaking. So, when it comes to account takeover, it's a really difficult balance for a business, right? I mean, most people reuse the same password across all their accounts. It's compromised in one data breach, and now I use it somewhere else. And it's not just the same password they're using, it's the same password and the same username or same email. And, a relatively interesting like legal case study that came up about a year ago was one of those like DNA genetics companies. There was account takeover where people were able to look at your, if you were a customer, they were able to look at your ethnic heritage and other characteristics based off of the DNA sample you provided or, saliva sample you provided. That company's now bankrupt. They were sued and brought these massive data breach charges against them. And it's like, well, in my mind, did they suffer a data breach? It wasn't a cybersecurity incident, right? It wasn't like someone hacked into their system. Someone used the stolen password and email address combinations compromised in a totally different data breach. And those people reused those same credentials with this company, and that's how the bad guys got access to their account. So it's too easy. The average consumer makes it too easy. And if I can take over someone's account and especially if it's a cryptocurrency account. That's not traceable, right? Or, it's traceable, but you're not going to come after it, right? If that money leaves, say, someone's Robinhood or Coinbase account and comes to my wallet, that's it, right? If it's Bitcoin or Ether, it's mine now. So that's what I try to do.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, crypto is still in this like a gray area in terms of regulation anyway. Even if you don't take over an account, if you just scam people on the dark web and just do full on whatever, say sell products that don't exist.
Yep.
Like let's say on the dark web you have no protection. Again, you're trying to buy drugs. They just say here's, pay me for drugs, and they don't exist. There's no one you can go to, right?
Right. Right.
So that's one type of scam I would do is scam criminals. Where are they gonna go?
Yeah. As long as they can't find you, right? Like if you go to a drug deal with a gun, they probably know who you are now. You might have it coming to you, but if you just say, "Hey, meet me on this forum, send me, 1/10 of a Bitcoin, and I'll send you a pound of whatever drug."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting what you said about this people reusing their passwords and stuff. I have a lot of sympathy for that because honestly, the amount of things we need to log on every day on our browsers and on our apps and stuff. And these days, because of security, they keep logging you out in minutes. So you have to keep logging in, and storing them on your phone or on your browser is one option. But then when you change browsers or change phones or whatever, you lose them. I mean, people have just had to simplify and kind of maintain some kind of sanity that they can't have a unique 45-character password for every single service they use. It sounds so unfair.
But I understand, and I actually sympathize with that as well. And I'm guilty of reusing passwords myself. But here's where I draw the line: if it's a bank, if it's anything financial related, if it's anything where I can personally suffer a loss, then it's unique and secure. And I also use different forms of two-factor authentication. But even that gets sophisticated when you start talking about the SIM swaps, right? So if I can take over your mobile phone number, then I can receive the one-time passcodes you get. Yeah. So for kind of those like whale targets, right? Someone who we know has 6 figures in their bank account or their crypto account, 7 figures or more in their account. That's the lengths that some of the more sophisticated fraud schemes will go through, right? Some form of social engineering, some form of mobile number, SIM swap is what it's typically called, type account takeover. And that's just to support the takeover of the financial account they're really after.
Yeah, that makes sense. But by the way, in your career, did you ever actually sit in a room with fraudsters? Like, what kind of people are we usually talking about? Like sociopaths or just desperately poor people with no other opportunities? Or
I would say the typical fraudster. Well, let me first answer the direct question. I have only sat in a room with reformed fraudsters. Okay, so those who kind of left that and decided, hey, I'm going to start a consultancy. I'm going to, go into the business of preventing it because, I've seen what it's like on the other side. In fact, when I first joined the industry, the company I worked with had a strong relationship with someone by the name of Frank Abigail, who was played by Leonardo DiCaprio in a movie called Catch Me If You Can. So that was pretty interesting. Now, that was old-timey fraud. That was more check fraud. But it was just kind of interesting to, be within 1 degree of separation of that person. But I'll say that the stereotypical modern fraudster is intelligent but lazy. They're looking for the path of least resistance to make pretty good money. And they can make as much money in a few hours a day, or maybe 10 hours a week, as most people, make in 40 hours a week at a traditional job.
I mean, you could accuse me of being intelligent and lazy, so they're intelligent, lazy, and unethical.
Yes, there has to be some moral corruption there as well, yes.
I'm not sure that's enough to distinguish me. We need to add more words there.
Intelligent, tech savvy to some degree.
Oh yeah, that's where they get me. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and morally corrupt.
Okay, yeah. So I'm almost there. Just the tech.
So I'll give you one more story that kind of describes the morally corrupt side, I think, kind of well. So imagine a product, or imagine selling something where you get a commission, right? Now imagine buying that product for yourself. So I've seen scams where fraudsters will cost a company, let's say, millions of dollars in losses just for them to make thousands of dollars in gains. Right. So if I set myself up as someone who's going to sell your product with a commission, I get set up, I buy from myself with stolen credit cards, I get the commission, I cash out before you realize everything I sold was sold fraudulently. Right. So there's a lot of scams where it's like a little bit of gain causes a lot more losses, and they don't care.
Yeah. I remember I have been on the phone with fraudsters, never met them in person, but I've been on the phone with them. And I remember what would happen is like in a call center or any kind of operations building, card fraud back then, they used to just block the card and, send the customer another one with a different number. But if there's ID fraud or something else suspected, something a bit more complex, they would send it to this other team. And I was sitting there, and like when there's a fraudster, they had this way of talking that was like fake friendly. And if you're a normal intelligent person, you would like figure out that, okay, something's off here. Why is he talking to me like a friend? We're definitely not friends. He's like called the customer services of MasterCard or Amex or whatever. Why would he be my friend? Like, no, who falls for this? But a lot of
Right.
people do. And then once they realize they can't pull the wool over your eyes, they get aggressive. Like the next move is to threaten you, like I'm gonna make you lose your job, stuff like that, like really awful manipulative stuff. And so there's definitely like some sociopaths in those circles, right?
That's a common technique, is to kind of create that sense of urgency, right? Some kind of threat, some kind of way to just probably to get someone to act more emotionally than logically.
Yeah, exactly. And the fear of, well, they couldn't have known that I didn't care about the job. I was just there so I can get to the golf course at 3 p.m. But also I think for a lot of people working not so well paying jobs, like when someone shouts that, you can lose this job or whatever, it is scary because they may not have a lot of other transferable skills, and like
Right.
this is what they got. So that fear is real, even if your rational brain is saying that, why would this guy be able to get me fired? Right?
Yeah.
Like, he
Right.
doesn't
Right.
even know who I am.
Yeah. No, it reminds me of an email I got one time that said, we hacked into your webcam and saw you jacking off, so pay us a Bitcoin or we'll send the video to everyone in your contact list. I'm sure some people fall for that. Like, I know that's not true. I know that did not happen, but it's a numbers game, right? You put that out there with enough hooks, and you get some bites.
Yeah. I got one exactly where the only information they have, if you like look at the text of the email and the threats, are they revealing any other information about you except that they sent it to an email address that they got in from somewhere? So basically, all that's leaked is your email address. If they actually had a threat against you and they knew about you, they would attach a screenshot of you
Right.
doing self-exploratory business, like they would do something to really push it home. Whereas these emails often come with just nothing, no personal
Right.
information.
But they have a high enough success rate, right? And even if that success rate is 0.1%, what's the effort of sending the email, right? One I received that had a little more credibility. I still didn't fall for it, of course. Was it included an old password I had used that had been compromised in a breach? So it said, "We know this is your email. Duh, we're emailing you here, and we know that this is a password you use with this email." And I recognized it. I'm like, yes, I did use that password, but I have probably 50 passwords compromised in data breaches. It happens daily. I'm not concerned. Delete and move on.
Yeah. How come these data breaches are so common? Because that's crazy. I mean, shouldn't there be more responsibility on the corporate side here? Is that they are the ones saying that you can't use our services or be a customer or buy our products without creating an account. And then you'd create it and that account gets compromised, where is the responsibility on their side? Are there any
Yeah.
big fines for this recently in the US?
So it's a terrible hypocrisy, right? A double standard. It really is. In the U.S., it's state by state. So in the U.S., different states have different data breach notification and/or rectification laws. California is one of the more stringent. I believe there has been a push for a national data breach notification law, but I don't know that it's gotten much traction. However, a lot of times it's just a notification law. You have to notify the affected customers. And sometimes, depending on the state, you have to provide credit report monitoring or some other service, depending on the type of information that was compromised. So, national ID, social security numbers, some type of information that would enable someone to take out a line of credit in your name, right? That's very damaging. That's the type of fraud I'm more afraid of, right? I don't care if someone steals and uses my credit card. I get that charge reversed. I care if someone takes out a loan in my name and defaults on that loan, right?
Yeah, with credit rate, these credit, what are they called? Your credit rating, the agencies who manage that.
Yep.
They're like they are unforgiving, even if something wasn't your fault. If someone makes an admin error that then goes on your record as you having failed to pay your bills, even
Right.
if you did, it never goes off your your credit rating is almost unfixable in Europe at least. Yeah.
No, it's the same in the United States. And you know what's, I say funny is not the right word. One of the credit reporting agencies actually suffered a data breach. It was TransUnion, which is, there's 3 major credit bureaus. And they actually suffered a data breach that compromised social security numbers and enabled identity fraud, like actually true identity theft. It's not right. It typically requires a police report, right? And even then you have to jump through a lot of hoops. I mean, the fact that there's a service that exists called LifeLock, which is essentially a company that protects your identity and fights to clear your name with the credit bureaus in the event of a breach, right? The fact that a service like that exists, says a lot about the, the whole system.
Yeah, it should be a simple message from the authorities who've proven that something, or from the people who made the mistake of giving a loan to the wrong person. Just emailing these agencies and saying like, listen, this shouldn't be a real strike to their credit record.
Right.
How isn't it that simple? That should be it, right? It's crazy.
There's so many different parties that have a different stake, right? So the bank that issued the fraudulent loan, if they can say the loan's in default, they at least get something back by sending it to a collections agency. So it's unfortunate, but it all comes down to like minimizing the loss. And the reality is the bank that wrote the loan with identity theft, I mean, probably should suffer the loss. Certainly not the consumer who's the victim. But the bank will claim they're the victim too, right? They'll say, well, how was someone able to get this information and really appear to be you? Maybe we should be mad at the company that suffered the data breach that enabled this. Or maybe we should be mad at the consumer who didn't shred their mail. And, it's everyone's going to shift the blame.
Yeah. But as a general rule, much like in anything, the final payer will just be the simple Simon. Taxpayer/consumer will have a tiny increase in their insurance premiums for life or whatever. That's usually where the payment gets taken out of when something happens.
And to bring it back to my first story, I mean, that, when that insurance company's losing a ton of money to fraud just because they send refund checks in the mail, that ultimately leads to higher premiums, and they can justify charging the higher premiums by chalking it up to higher operational costs. But those operational costs are really fraud losses that they're probably the most culpable in allowing.
Yeah. So what should be, like right now, what would be your advice to, other than passwords? I mean, we keep hearing that, but I suppose we should hear it more because we're all still repeating passwords. But what else can you do to avoid getting your life turned around by one of these sociopaths,
So turn on multiple forms of authentication. My view is a password's not enough to validate this is the true end user. And even then, I would prefer something like a Google Authenticator to text message based and SMS based one-time password because of those SIM swap type scams. So you're going to have to use passwords for the ones that matter. Make them unique and strong, right? I will be the first to admit there's several passwords I reuse, but anything related to financial accounts, those are unique and strong. And on top of that, even if the company doesn't force me to do it, I opt into it, those forms of multi-factor authentication. Preferably Google Authenticator, but if I can't use an authenticator, then I will use the SMS-based authentication method.
Yeah. Do you remember this happened probably while we were both in fraud in different functions? But you remember that case when that cheating website got hacked? It was a data
Ashley
breach.
Madison.
Ashley Madison.
Yes,
and that
I do.
was so strange because it split the entire Western world like along conservative versus liberal lines. Like you were either happy that all these people got exposed because they were engaged in adultery, or it was a major crime by the company itself to be so lax with security in something so sensitive where privacy really matters. And yeah, I remember that having such weird conversations about that when people were like, well, at the end of the day, obviously, it has everything that you've ever bought online been 100% ethical.
Right.
Yeah, what if someone hacked your accounts because you like the Cleveland Browns, which in itself is unethical, right? And just because someone thinks that you support the wrong team, then you deserve your stuff to be put out there or whatever. Like, that's just a bad example, but I'm saying, yeah, that was a strange case.
I think that is a great example. And there's been other examples, and I think it depends on the issue. People will take totally different sides or views. So let me give you another example. I listened to the podcast with Joseph Marshall, and you guys talked about Hulk Hogan, right? So I don't know if you're familiar with that, but there was a leaked Hulk Hogan sex tape.
Yeah.
Okay, so towards the end of that sex tape, he was on camera using the N-word. And that's what basically ended his career. That is when, Vince McMahon and wrestling said, we have to part ways with you. Now, and I could also think of, it was a basketball team owner, an NBA team owner. I want to say it was the LA Clippers.
Who told his wife it's all right if he sleeps with them, but just don't be seen with them.
Yes.
By them, he meant
and he used the N-word. Yeah, and I think he explicitly used the N-word. So, like both those cases are terrible things. People shouldn't say those things, right? But they said them in private, and then they were made public, right? Or even talk about the guy at the Coldplay concert. He was at a concert cheating on his wife with someone he worked with, and they were shown on the Jumbotron.
Yeah.
So, I mean, at what point are people entitled to privacy? And I'm not saying I take a side on any of these issues, but to me, they're all a similar issue, right? Do people have, are they entitled to privacy even if they're doing something that's considered unethical or deplorable? And when that is compromised, let me put it this way: it might not be admissible as evidence in a court of law, right? But it certainly has an impact in the court of public opinion.
Yeah. Well, I think you draw the line roughly somewhere by that stadium example, because a stadium is what we often use as an example of a public space, a theater or a stadium, meaning you're in public and there are cameras and this is a mega concert that's being filmed. Like, that one, I think, a little bit less sympathy. But yeah, the guys who, like, Hulk Hogan sued the tabloid that exposed that, right? And
it was a company called Gawker, and they declared bankruptcy.
Yeah, so he got them back, eh? Didn't know he used the N-word, though, to be honest.
That came later in the video, and that's what really damaged his career. He was making a resurgence recently.
You're suggesting that I was gun consuming the video before we got to the end. It's what No, I never watched it at all, actually.
No.
Hulk Hogan having sex is not like in my top 10 of people.
No, I'm not interested in that either. But
no.
But it's a private conversation, right? And the same thing with the Clippers owner. It's a private conversation someone recorded without their consent, and you're engaging in bad activity, whether it's adultery or racism. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting conversation.
Yeah. So after fraud, you've pivoted. You're an esteemed professor of economics now.
So my title's assistant professor, but yes.
But I've seen some reviews on ratemyprofessor.com, which yeah. Oh no, they're great. They're great. You're very highly liked. What is it? The modern student then now? It's Chat GPT cheating, lazy, a Gen Z, whatever letter combinations the generations are now, or are they much smarter than us and we're all just arrogant and they're just using the tools available to them?
It's definitely a mix of both. I will say I've had to be more creative in my assessment tools to, be able to detect the use of AI in a way that shows you don't actually understand this at all. I think using the tools available to you is good, but I think that there needs to be some interpretation and analysis of what a large language model gives you. But I'll say in general, I design things to be, especially in my field, rely more on calculations than essays, and I don't have to worry as much about the use of ChatGPT in that regard. But I do see it sometimes, and I found that by focusing on the most recent economic data, I can kind of beat ChatGPT because they're not referencing they're not going to be referencing the unemployment data that comes out on September 5th for the month of August, right? Until probably early 2026 at the earliest. Okay. So if I want a student to opine on something related to macroeconomics, I will focus on the most contemporaneous data I can find.
So it hasn't been uploaded to the models yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's interesting that they're a bit lagging behind, but that sounds like a problem that they will fix.
I probably just told them to fix it. Yeah. They're going to listen to this and get on it.
You know that they are. Oh, it was so creepy. The models are, if not listening, they're because Spotify and all these other services create transcripts automatically as well. So I think they're scraping the transcripts. And I had a guest, Jeffrey, who's a friend of the show. He runs another show. And he said, like, because we have these public service announcements at the end. And he said, let me ask ChatGPT. And he asked for, like, considering the tone of the show, give something that's genuine, but also a bit silly. And what it returned was incredible. And and it clearly scrapes the transcripts. I've asked it stuff before about the show, but they think very strangely. They'll pick out something out of a 2-hour conversation and decide that that's like my opinion about something, and that's what I'm espousing on the internet. You know what I mean? So they're like accurate, but very weird on what they focus on.
Right. Well, you know what that tells me is we should have just a conversation of nonsense, right? Like incoherent, like it'll be real words, it'll be real English words, but it won't make sense. And let's try to throw off the model.
Yeah. Well, I personally don't think camels should have bank accounts. And if so, they should be, not in reproductive age anymore. Maybe, post-menopausal camels could have bank accounts.
The postmenopausal camel is one of the demographics of the most underbanked species in the planet, and I think more needs to be done for global awareness of postmenopausal camels and their access to the banking industry.
Amazing, by the way. You've just created a sentence that they will hopefully. I mean, it's scary because they're getting so good that they'll start understanding that we're fucking with them. But this will be scraped by the models. And then if you asked ChatGPT what Danny thinks about camels, this will come up 100%.
I'm trying to hold back my laugh to not tip the hand that this is so ridiculous. But that was an incredible example, especially because we were talking about fraud, and we know how much fraud has been committed by sloths and and by rabid meerkats. And the unsung victim of this whole scenario is the post-menopausal camel.
Yeah, and I don't think they're seeing the same opportunities as those others. Like there's a lot of historical prejudice as well.
I wonder if we'll ever see a postmenopausal camel in a political campaign for a position of power.
Well, we've seen several in the White House, so it's possible. Look at me navigate that without nobody knows which party I'm referring to.
No,
Could
that's
be either,
perfect.
could be both.
Yeah. I've seen representation on both sides of the aisle.
So tell me, I mean, you are, based on one student review, you are a genius econ wizard. Did you know that?
Wow, that's great. I would love to know who wrote that.
Yeah. And speaking of various species in the White House representing various colors, what should we all think about right now, what's going on with the American economics? Are you allowed to talk about that publicly, or is it
Yes.
sensitive?
Yeah. No, I mean there are some sensitive topics. So I'll be honest, I occasionally get calls from, we have like a communications and government relations department at the college where I work, and they'll say, hey, this local news station wants to talk about tariffs. And I say no to tariffs every time because that's just too politically charged. But for the most part, I'm more than happy to talk about any of these things. And it's a subject of genuine interest for me. I really do. I am interested and enjoy this subject. I will say, going on right now, my biggest concern is this idea around the independence of the Federal Reserve, the central bank of the United States. You know, the Federal Reserve needs to be a politically independent organization because they make decisions that have a longer time horizon to come to fruition, certainly longer than, every 2 years when there's a midterm or presidential election. So I think that that's an important aspect of any central bank, is to be politically independent. Now, on the one hand, politicians in power are able to nominate members of the board of directors for central banks. But at what point do the people in a position at the central bank feel like they have to succumb to public pressure that a leader, states publicly that we should do this, right? We should be cutting interest rates. We should be doing these things that boost the economy. What's good for the economy in the short run isn't necessarily what's good for the economy in the long run. And politicians who have to be reelected every 4 years, or have colleagues that need to be elected in 2 years, it worries me to see a central bank have to deal with any political pressure on any side, right? From any party. So basically, there's a Federal Reserve board governor who's being fired, and the allegation is valid. The allegation is that they committed mortgage fraud. But the question is, are they only being fired to put someone else in that seat? And that's someone who will be more likely to succumb to political pressure? Or is it really because of their fraudulent actions?
Yeah, bankers committing fraudulent actions in America for people of our generation has not been a prosecutable crime before. So
Right. Yeah. And there will not be prosecution, but is it enough to oust them from this seat? Right. So it's interesting. I don't know. I do think it's important for any central bank to be independent, because I think monetary policy can operate on a longer cycle than the political cycle. And politicians seem to be considered on short term, what can look good for voters now versus what's best for the country on a longer, a longer view.
it's the exact same argument as the Supreme Court, right? That it's meant to be above these short-term fluctuations of politics and an instrument of long-term stability.
Yes. Absolutely. And especially when you consider the Supreme Court's a lifetime seat. At least on the board of governors for a central bank, there's a term limit. But yeah, in the Supreme Court, once you're on, you're there until you decide to leave or pass.
Yeah. So what do you think of the Fed, the central bank? What is the most important role of it right now? Like, going into, we're due for another crash or bubble soon, based on, I don't know, conventional understanding of idiots like me and history.
So honestly, the Fed, there's a portion of their role that is kind of like on a banking regulation standpoint, right? But what I see most important is how they continue to conduct monetary policy. Interest rates are still relatively high. Inflation's still above what they consider their target, and probably will continue to be for several more quarters. So the president has really kind of put the Fed in a hard spot. They probably could cut interest rates at their September meeting. Like, the economic data supports a small interest rate cut. Maybe not much more beyond that. But does it look like they're succumbing to political pressure by performing that interest rate cut? Right? And does that put their independence into question? So it's been made clear that the current chair of the Federal Reserve, he's in his second term, Jerome Powell, he will not be renewed when his term expires in, I want to say, April or May of 2026. That has been made clear. But he needs to save his legacy. He's had the highest inflation under his leadership in a long time. And the Fed was wrong in 2021 when they said inflation was transitory. It was temporary. It would be over soon. I mean, inflation reached its highest level really in my lifetime and persisted to where it's still above their goal. Now, their goal it's not an easy goal. Their goal is 2% or less inflation at an annualized rate. But we're still over that. Right, we're still over that. So
yeah, am I crazy for suggesting that some of the things they say are because the markets react to everything they say, that some of the things they say might be on purpose in order to not, cause a panic?
absolutely. So they definitely pre-message, and they definitely release, kind of statements, and it might be one of the board of governors members might release a public statement, right? It's not an official, like, here's what we're going to do, but it's kind of saying like, well, hey, I think we should consider lowering or raising interest rates at our next meeting. And I think the data they provide, we call it the dot plot. It's basically every voting member of the Federal Open Market Committee, those who decide the direction of interest rates, kind of says where they think the federal funds rate, the primary interest rate, will be, it maybe 5 different periods looking out in the future, right? And the combination of everyone's answer to that question gives us a good idea of where we think rates are heading, maybe not necessarily exactly at the next meeting, but in the not too distant future. So there's definitely a lot of messaging, pre-messaging going on. And every time interest rates are changed or unchanged, there's not only the initial announcement of what's happening, but there's an hour-long press conference where they discuss the reasoning behind it, and more importantly, what they're looking for going forward. So yeah, it's absolutely intentional not to spook markets one way or the other.
Yeah, that makes sense. Can I ask you a really big question? This is a question that I'd love for your answer as well, because I've asked behind the scenes, not people who've appeared on the show, but certain people who've been close to power and I've had the privilege of knowing in my life. So everything you know about economics, in general, the capitalist, democratic, free, liberal, whatever you want to call it, the lifestyle that we lead seems to be increasingly and more intensely around the world in clashes against other interests. Call them China or Russia or whatever you want. Do you think we're winning? As in, is capitalism doing well in our sort of way of life? Is it doing well, or are you worried at all?
I'm not worried. I think capitalism is doing well. I think we've learned that capitalism has to be regulated. We need antitrust laws. We need to be able to prevent and break up monopolies. We need things like a minimum wage, right? I would even get away from the word capitalism and say free market versus like a command economy as these two extremes of the spectrum. So a command economy, that's North Korea, right? Like every economic decision comes down from the dictatorship. A free market economy, I mean, there isn't really a 100% free market economy. I mean, Japan, the United States, Canada, Western Europe are mostly free market. They're free market economies, but there's some government intervention, and it's to level the playing field, and it's to make things work for as many people as possible. So I think as we continue to regulate capitalism to the extent that it's needed, such as not allowing too much concentration of power in let's say a Google or a Microsoft, and allow those companies to be broken up, then I think it works. I start to get concerned when I see things like Comcast, one of the biggest television and internet service providers, now owns NBC Universal, one of the biggest media content producers. Like, there's some conflict of interest there, right? That's this vertical integration typically is not good for a consumer. And maybe if you have Comcast as your internet service provider, they'll make sure you get top tier speeds when you use Peacock, their streaming service, but they might throttle you a little bit when you use Disney or Disney Plus or Hulu or something else, right? And I'm not accusing them of that, but like it provides that opportunity for corruption when there's too much concentration of power. So we need to be cognizant of that. And as long as we continue to be cognizant of that, I think it's still the best way, in my opinion. And clearly I'm biased.
Okay, I'm with you on Comcast. By the way, they ruined golf, at least. Unwatchable.
That's right.
Any American coverage of golf is just like, it's so greedy with the ads and just unwatchable. So no sympathy there. I'm the Comcast NBC thing, I understand that. But surely the bigger monopoly / mixing of industries and powers is with big tech now.
Absolutely.
You have Nvidia, which is, after the East India Company, the most valuable company in human history. And then all the others, right? I'm sure Google is catching up, and all the others are fighting to catch up as well. And they seem to be pretty close to power, to the point where they're involved in decisions about American strategy, like of the American empire abroad and stuff, right? I mean, this is somewhat worrying.
It is. It is. There's, I guess, this kind of like tech industrial complex we have to be aware of nowadays. So on the one hand, I mean, we saw, whether it was with Brexit or whether it was with the 2016 presidential election, we saw that when social media companies could be used to push a certain political message, it definitely swung where the voters went that nobody predicted, right? The traditional pollster methods did not predict Brexit. They did not predict Trump winning in 2016. Now, I'm not opining on whether those were good or bad decisions. I'm just saying nobody saw those things coming, and those things largely were made possible through the use of targeted social media-based advertising. And now what we see is pretty strict regulations on political messaging around targeted advertising, right? To the point where it's like, well, we have to prove this is coming from a real, a real company, a real person. This isn't misinformation agents based out of Russia trying to sway an election in a way that they believe is beneficial for them. And now when you talk about, and you made the great example of NVIDIA, now we're getting in the business of saying, here's the chips you're allowed to send to China. And if you're going to send these chips to China, okay, now we'll allow you to send these more powerful chips to China, but we need to take a cut, right? Like that's what's been on the table lately.
That's quite dodgy, yeah.
Yeah. It's new, right? Like, I've never seen anything like this before. I don't know what to make of it. It is dodgy, though. You're right.
Our systems of everything we have, regulation, our political systems are sort of adapting to the most powerful technology that has ever existed, aside from the atomic bomb, I suppose. But
right.
Yeah, but this kind of could be an atomic bomb when it comes to everything: labor markets, balance of power globally, all those things.
No, absolutely. It definitely feels like we're at, or at least approaching, some inflection point where there can be some really major changes. And I don't know what you would call this, the fourth or the fifth industrial revolution, right? But it really is some type of revolution in how we conduct business and the distribution of power, and, who the next global hegemon might be.
Yeah. Well, now that we've sufficiently depressed everyone, I want to move into something fun, because you have a interesting parallel to someone who was here before, Mark Wallace, who had been a development consultant in Africa for a long time, and sort of learned a lot about the macro and the big things that are going on over there. but then chose to apply it, all his knowledge, to something very small, and he's making craft chocolate out of cocoa from Liberia, I believe, and he's making it in Vancouver and selling it to rich people on Vancouver Island or whatever. So you are applying all your economics to beer.
So, beer is an interest of mine, and let's see, are you drinking a stout or a porter? I've seen you take a few swigs. What have you got there?
My co-host Sylvia told me to drink a milk stout.
A milk stout. Okay.
Do you know
Very
anything
good.
about milk stouts?
I do. So, in my personal preference, I guess might be the right word. The lactic acid in beers tends to not do well with me, so I'm not a huge fan of the milk stouts. Actually, there's milk stouts that I've really enjoyed, but I can't really drink more than like 5 ounces.
Yeah.
And it's not just the milk stouts. It's what they, this is probably an American thing. They call them milkshake IPAs. They're IPAs with some lactic acid in it to kind of make them a little creamier. Again, that interesting, not my favorite style, but on the IPAs, but it just the lactic acid doesn't do well for me.
Yeah, I have had the problem with not giving proper craft beer the time and effort that I would give to a single malt whiskey, for example, because a beer is often like after a round of golf or some other exercise. It's something that it gives you that like nice feeling afterwards and a little bit of a social lubricant to shoot the shit with your friends. So I never give it the focus, and I don't smell the aromas and all that pretentious stuff that you're meant to do.
Hey, the only thing you're meant to do is enjoy it, whatever that looks like to you. I'm not big on the smelling notes myself either. To be honest, I will say I'm an advocate for proper glassware. I have come to find that the right glass for the right beer does make a small but notable difference. And I mean, hell, I'll pour a Miller Lite, a large, production American domestic Pilsner. I'll pour it in a Pilsner glass, and it's better than drinking it out of the can.
Definitely, especially if you don't know what's in it. Like, especially if someone brings you a Miller Lite in a nice glass and tells you it's something fancy, then it'll probably taste fancy.
Yeah, right. There's a little bit of a placebo effect, but I think there is a real effect there too.
What's the name of your beer company, or is it just something you sell to friends?
So, I don't brew really beer myself. I've done some homebrew kits in the past, but nothing at like any scale. So, my interest in beer is really at a hyper local level. I created a website called drinklocalflorida.com, where I seek to catalog every single brewery, distillery, winery, cidery, meadery in the state of Florida. So there's over 350 individual breweries cataloged, 50-ish distilleries, 50-ish wineries, maybe 25 cideries and meaderies. And it is really just a resource for anyone who lives in or is visiting Florida to say, hey, where can I get a craft beer made locally near me?
Yeah, awesome website. Can I ask immediately, though, what's with the no security certificate on the website, though?
I'm not taking payments.
Oh, so that doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
It's all free. So this is great. This is all free, and it's a resource you can just, if you're into it, the Florida Brewery Database. My God, so official. I love
it. So I have it organized alphabetically, but what's more useful is probably the county and regional listings. So if you're ever, on holiday in, Pinellas County, Florida, you can go to the page for, I actually, where most of the visitors come from is through natural Google search. If you Google, Pinellas County breweries or Miami breweries, it's always on the kind of the first page of natural search.
I am going to send this to our guest from 2 weeks ago, who is a cruise ship guy. And I think people arriving in Florida by boat might want to go for a nice beer.
Absolutely. So you got Fort Lauderdale, Miami, you have Cape Canaveral, and then you have the Tampa Bay area, 4 major cruise ports, each in kind of different counties and regions of the state. Yeah. So I only make revenue from the third party advertisements that are on the site. I do have bigger aspirations for the site. I would like to get it to a point where work with breweries directly to feature them and get a small annual membership payment from the brewery itself rather than through third party ads, which I think will make the site better for users, right? Because it's covered in Google AdWords today. But I'm just trying to cover my costs of hosting the site and the time it takes to keep up with it. I will say, unfortunately, the craft beer market seems to have been oversaturated and there are more closures than
You
openings.
took my question.
Oh, sorry.
I felt like, just without knowing anything about it, I felt like, just from being a pub visitor, that suddenly, like, the explosion of it was maybe, what are we saying, 8 to 10 years ago would have been the sweet spot,
Yeah.
when it was, when people were kind of really hungry for it, but there weren't enough of them. And now it's the opposite, right?
Yeah. No, so now I find myself going to a new brewery and thinking like this is pedestrian, like there's nothing special about this beer. And that shouldn't be the case.
Gin took over as the fashionable craft thing to drink for a while. It's very British. I mean, here in the UK, at least, beer and gin are very very British things. And and gin took over, but I feel like gin is now massively saturated as well in terms of craft gin brands. Everyone has one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's definitely a gin pedigree, right? Some Hendrix and Cucumber, right, as a classic drink. But gin can be so different, right? It has that floral kind of notes to it. I feel like there's a lot you could do with gin to make it your own, make it unique, right? It's still gin, but it has definitely some aspects to it that can be unique. That's interesting, though. I found that, at least in the United States, it's harder for the distilleries to get traction. A lot of distilleries, it's kind of a second thought, where it was a brewery first. Bourbon whiskey is so big in the Kentucky area. Anyone trying to do it outside of Kentucky, the whiskey aficionados or the bourbon aficionados are automatically dismissing it, right? It's not real whiskey if it doesn't come from Kentucky. But yeah, I mean, beer's great. I grew up in Florida, and I wanted to kind of combine a skill set I learned working for a small business and making websites with something I was interested in, which was beer. And, kind of had fun experimenting and building a website that attempts to catalog every brewery in the state. It ebbs and flows, though, so it's hard to stay on top of, who's new and who, unfortunately, might have shuttered their doors.
I feel like, maybe optimistically speaking, I don't know if it's already happened on college campuses, but this younger generation is a bit drier, and the stuff that, the binge drinking, and I'm sure that's still going on, but there must be people who'd rather have like one or two drinks of something nice, like craft beers, rather than getting drunk, because the statistics showing that that generation drinks less. So there's a market there.
I agree. And from what I've seen anecdotally, that's the case. So I went to Florida State University, the Seminoles. And I was there from like 2005 to 2010. There was one craft beer place. It was called the Fermentation Lounge. They didn't brew their own beer. They just brought in, higher quality beers. Okay, so I've gone back more recently, and there are, I want to say, 5 to 7 breweries, like craft breweries. The Fermentation Lounge is still there, but became a brewery as well. So they still have, European beers and things that are harder to find in the United States, and the beers they make on site. And there's even a brewery on campus in the Union. It was one of the breweries that was, in Tallahassee, but out, not on campus, now has opened a tap room, literally like in the middle of campus in the student union. So there's a shift to quality over quantity, which is probably better for the health of the college student nowadays, right? Whereas, we were drinking Natty Light and Ice House out of a keg, and binge drinking.
Do you know about the app for craft beer enthusiasts where you can?
I use Untapped.
Okay, is that like where you can find like the rarest ones in the world and review them and stuff?
Well, So Untapped for me is just a tracking tool where you check into any beer that you try, and pubs and breweries that are paying customers of Untapped will share their menus, and you can access their menus. But if you go to any place, you can check in any beer. So I like Untapped, and I strictly use it for my Florida beers. I kind of have it as an extension of drinklocalflorida.com, where I only track Florida beers that I've tried, and I've had 1,445 unique Florida beers.
My.
And this is going back since probably 2018, since I've really been tracking them.
We're operating on, can we get that to like one per day? Like we're not too far.
Well, so if I go to a brewery that I've never been to before, I want to try different things, and I'll get a flight. So I might get 2 flights and check into 10 different beers I've never had before.
So you're not having a pint of everything.
Well, I would say at least 80% of that is pints.
Okay.
Or a 12-ounce can, because sometimes it's packaged too.
What would you say, like, 2 questions. Number one, all-time favorites, the ones you've reviewed, 5 stars, 10 points, whatever the scale is. Something that's pretty international that people might be able to find. What's like a great...
Okay, so the easy to find, international really kind of restricts the pool here. So there was a popular Tampa Bay brewery called Cigar City that then was acquired by... It's actually gone through a couple different acquisitions. It was bought by a kind of a regional craft beer maker, and then I believe it was bought by like the company that owns Monster Energy. So their most famous beer was called Jaialai. Jaialai. So it's Cigar City Jaialai. Now there's a version of the Jaialai that's called the White Oak Jaialai. So it's Jaialai aged in a white oak used bourbon barrel. That is definitely like one of my 5 out of 5, top beers.
They have a mix pack as well that you can order in the UK.
Does it include the white oak?
What? There's one that's a white can. Let's see. Yeah, white oak. A gray and green can. Yeah.
That's the one.
All right, I'll go get that entire mix pack. That's a great recommendation. By the way, great tangent here. Jaialai is a game, right?
Yes.
And there was a league, don't ask me how I know this, but there was a Jaialai league in Florida, and the guy who ran it got killed by the mafia.
That doesn't surprise me because he probably ran it out of Miami. So, Jaialai is big in South Florida. I don't know what the roots of the sport are. I don't know if it's Cuban or from a Spanish-speaking country originally, maybe South American.
It must be Indian. No.
Is it Indian? The name would imply that.
No, it's Basque. Basque from North.
Okay.
Yeah, the Basque country. Cool.
So for some reason, it really took off in like the Miami area, but it's a dangerous game. I mean, people die playing it every year. That hard, heavy ball gets hurled around very fast, and you get hit in the head.
Roger Wheeler was the businessman who got murdered at a famous golf course at Southern Hills. They play like majors there, major championships.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. He was killed by Whitey Bulger's gang. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm so happy we got to talk about that. But by the way, are you a hockey guy as well?
I enjoy hockey. I'm a Lightning fan. I would say hockey is the sport I know third best. I know football, American football, and baseball better than I know hockey.
All right. I will need 2 things from you. First of all, thank you so much for your time. I mean, this was awesome, and I'm sure you have stories and economics to teach us, and we would love to have you back for more if I come up with some things you may be able to answer. But before we wrap it up, to get back to the fraud thing, something for people to keep an eye on now going into the future, like what kind of fraud is coming, maybe what should be focused on. And also we'll need your Super Bowl pick.
Okay, so fraud going forward, set up the 2-factor authentication and use a good password for a financial account. I mean, really, there's billions, if not hundreds of billions of compromised records in data breaches. And you just have to assume any password you've ever used is going to be compromised if it's not already. So the password is not enough. It's the multi-factor authentication. And I just, AI is going to change things. We talk about like social engineering and deep fakes. I mean, there in the not too distant future, conceivably someone could mimic your voice using AI and sound like you and authorize transactions or transfers or something, right? And it would be very plausible. Or AI can be used to, nowadays someone gets access to your email inbox and there's a certain number of scams they use. Well, now I'm going to look at your email inbox and I'm going to use AI to read every email you've sent to this person, capture your tone and likeness, and craft a targeting campaign that mimics you to such a high degree of realism. There's just so many avenues now where social engineering and scamming is just it's going to be so much harder to detect. And it's going to be difficult. Like I remember the days where old people would be, like elderly people, octogenarians would be targeted with these scams where it's like, I'm your granddaughter and I'm in a jail in Mexico and I need you to send bail money. And it didn't matter how ridiculously fake it sounded because they were targeting someone who was, 85 years old, right? But now that might work against someone in their 40s who's worried that something happened to their child or something happened at their child's school. There's just so much information out there that's going to be leveraged against us, potentially.
So basically, don't believe anything that someone you don't know sends you, even if it's a convincing video.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like we used to say trust but verify, but I think we're going to enter this era of don't even trust it until you verify it. Like we can't give the benefit of the doubt. We have to almost assume everything's fraudulent or fake.
Yeah. And who's winning the Super Bowl?
The Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
See,
no, I'm just kidding.
But no. I don't think they'll win it, but to make the semis, like the conference finals, I think Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans and these guys, if they stay healthy, they're pretty underrated. I mean, they're always a bit frisky.
I think the sleeper for the Bucs this year is Chris Godwin coming back. So Chris Godwin is going to miss the first 5, 6, 7 weeks of the season. So he might be extra fresh, like when the playoffs come around. He'll have, more longevity, hopefully, when the playoffs come around, and that'll be a huge asset. No, I mean, it's hard to say before we even get week 1 play. Philadelphia and Kansas City, they've maybe lost a few players, but they still look pretty damn good. If Jalen Hurts stays healthy, I don't know who's really stopping him consistently. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's one of those two teams.
Yeah, it's become this thing where, in European soccer, they used to say that every year there's a lot of talk and then Germany wins. And and now it's like every year there's a lot of talk and then Mahomes and the Chiefs, they win. But just hoping for the Lions, man, just something good to happen to that city in like 30 years of just shit,
The St. Brown, the receiver, Amon-Ra St.
Yeah.
Brown, he's an incredible athlete. He's a playmaker. I wouldn't be surprised if the NFC Championship was the Lions, Detroit Lions, and the Philadelphia Eagles for the NFC Championship.
And then you have the dark horses, Tampa and Green Bay, I think, and that could get real frisky, surprisingly out there. Awesome, Justin. Thank you so much for your time. That's super interesting, and I'm always such an idiot that it becomes a little bit more about the person, and maybe some people would like you to go deeper into some nitty gritty, so we can always I can do some research on a topic and do something like that as well.
No, it was great meeting you. It was great participating in this podcast with you, Danny. I really appreciate it. And I'm just one person with one opinion, or one idea on how I see things around economics. I would be more than happy to talk about it. It's one of my favorite subjects to discuss. But I'd also say when it comes to macroeconomics, monetary policy, the political science side of it, right? Fiscal policy and economics and poli-sci, you gotta make your own decisions, right? You gotta see, does this seem right? Who benefits from this? What are the short-term gains? What are the incentives? But I will provide my opinion if you ever ask.
Awesome. Thank you. And if you ever see him at any kind of conference, don't talk to Gary from the Cayman Islands. He's nothing but butter.
All right, so I was joking about Sam. I was referring to Sam Bankman-Fried, who I have no relation to whatsoever.
Oh, good. Don't start with the disclaimers now. People were gonna start Googling and figuring out what conspiracy we're talking about, you know?
Yeah, no, I was talking about SBF, and you know, one more thing I think we need to bring awareness for is the postmenopausal camels.
Yes, absolutely. That's the only message I have here for the end is don't.
If there's one takeaway from this conversation, it's the underbanked postmenopausal camels.
Free the camels. That's all. Thanks, Justin. Have a great day or evening, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you. Sounds great. Thank you, Danny.
Cheers, buddy. Thank you.